Hello and welcome to Teaching the Reader, Not the Text, a fresh look at response. My name's Melinda Clifford. I'm the coordinator for the elementary and secondary English language arts programs at the Ministry of Education, and I am accompanied today by my wonderful colleague Dawn.
Hi, I'm Dawn Uniat. I'm a teacher from the Sir Wilfrid Laurier School Board, and I'm currently on a load of service working with Melinda on the ELA team.
In part one, we're going to take a fresh look at reader response, how it's reflected in our programs, and how an inductive approach can help us dig into texts. In part two, we'll look at the process of constructing meaning and work with the reader response learning continuum, which is a tool that can help guide teachers in their observation of students' development of reader response. We'll take a look at the online version and how we can move students forward in reader response. In part three, we look at how to fine-tune teaching and best teach the reader and not the text, and finish with a look at some wonderful literature that works beautifully for response. Okay, so teaching the reader, not the text. This quote is from the book What Readers Really Do by Dorothy Barnhouse and Vicky Vinton, who both share years of experience as educators, literacy consultants, and writers, and it's what served as our inspiration for today's workshop. The book, What Readers Really Do, breaks down the process of reading and draws attention to the invisible thinking process that happens as we read. By noticing and naming what students do as they read, we can better help them draft and revise meaning and improve understanding. So, first of all, what is reader response? We're going to share with you a short video to give you an overview of reader response theory.
Reader response theory looks at the relationship between reader and text. What does a text do within the mind of a reader? How do we construct meaning and express individual responses and understandings as we experience a text? In her groundbreaking work, Towards a Transactional Theory of Reading, Louise Rosenblatt explained reader response this way. Readers are active participants who create meaning during the reading process. Readers focus on many aspects of a text to construct meaning as they interact. Readers pay attention to the feelings, attitudes, and associations that are evoked by signs, symbols, clues, patterns, and gaps in the text. According to Rosenblatt, text is just ink on a page until a reader comes along and gives it life. Rosenblatt explained reading as a transaction that occurs between the text and the reader. It is a two-way process as the reader brings their own experiences, emotions, ideologies, knowledge, culture, and worldview into play as they decode, interpret, and create meaning. Readers infuse personal meaning into texts. Who we are determines the meaning we extract from a text. As we read, a text may undergo a series of transformations. An initial reading may not elicit the same ideas and reactions as multiple readings. Interpretations of a text can vary from one reader to another, and comparison of interpretations through discussion can produce multiple meanings. Discussion can lead to extended understanding and the possibility that the same text may hold different meanings for different readers. Reading is a process of trial and error. Readers are constantly constructing, synthesizing, and modifying meaning as they interact with a text. Reader response theory is not about what the author may have meant. Readers interpret text through their individual lenses and arrive at different interpretations. As readers share, discuss, and compare their interpretations of texts, they are open to adjusting their ideas and thinking and develop deeper understanding.
So if we take a look at the elementary and secondary programs, we can see that the response process is mentioned at all levels and involves interpreting text as well as discussion. At the elementary level, students develop a personal response process in the context of a community of readers. They move beyond the initial response and share responses with others to clarify meaning and enrich interpretation. At the secondary cycle 1 level, students talk about their own responses to a text within a community of readers and make connections between their own experiences and the world of the text. And at the secondary cycle 2 level, students talk about their own responses to a text within a classroom community and situate meanings within their own experiences and the world of the text in order to transform initial readings into more conscious interpretations. And now I'll pass it over to you, Dawn, to lead us into our first activity.
Thank you, Melinda. You might be familiar with Bob Probst. He's written quite a lot about reading and literacy, and he recently has been collaborating with Kylene Beers. You might know their book, Notice a Note. Bob Probst says, the books and stories and poems we lay before our students are not, after all, simply instruction manuals or repositories of information. They are instead invitations to a passionate engagement with human experiences. These texts may reflect our own experiences or contradict and challenge what we understand based upon those experiences. They may open our minds to new cultures, complex ideas, wide-ranging issues, and a variety of viewpoints. Or they may ask readers to engage with the ideas in the text in order to construct a deeper understanding of the human experience. But the point I think he's making is that to respond to a text, we need to start with a text that speaks to us. And now I'm going to ask you to read what's on your screen and consider what's going on in your mind as you read. And you might want to pause right now until you've finished reading. Keeping in mind what you just read, consider what you wonder and what you know. And at this point, we may have a literal understanding of the words on the screen and what each one means, but not how they work together. And we might wonder about the context and if some of the words are connected in some way. The words you just read were taken from the poem Food Music Memory by Susan Marie Scavo. On the next slide, I'm going to ask you to read through the poem twice. And consider the thoughts and emotions you experience as you read. Note some of the details and some of the specific words and phrases that spark your thinking and your feelings as you read. So please pause the presentation here and read the poem twice, and then go on to the next slide. Now that you've read the poem, consider these questions. What do we know now? And what do we still wonder? What has changed after reading the poem? Now that we see the words in context, what has led us to new understandings? And we might see connections, and we might understand now how the words fit together. We can start to make inferences. And if we're considering perspective, who's telling the story? Whose perspectives are being shared? And what does this text tell us about how perspectives differ? So I'm going to ask you to pause to read the poem one last time. Consider your own interpretations. What were you thinking and what process led you there? In our live presentations, we ask participants to talk about the poem in breakout rooms and discuss the guiding questions that you see on the slide. What thoughts and emotions did you experience as you read the poem? What are the big ideas in the text? What clues in the text led you there? What do you still wonder about? If you're viewing this with colleagues, please take time to discuss the guiding questions. When debriefing, our participants talked about how they came to construct meaning and interpret the poem. Some of the realizations we came to: we looked at the use of pronouns to help us make inferences about who is speaking. Is it a mother and daughter, a mother and son? Is it siblings? We saw connections between the words, and we made inferences based on the words themselves and also on how they were grouped in the text. For example, the words belt, hairbrush, and hand. If encountered separately, they don't have the same impact as when we see them grouped together. And this was a point where many people started to make inferences and read between the lines. We focused on details we noticed and looked for clues to help us discover deeper meaning. After reading the poem, thinking about it, talking about it, we each arrived at our own understanding and considered, how did we get there? What was the process? If we can describe the process, how we arrived at our understanding, that can help to make our thinking more visible. Some specific strategies we used included assessing prior knowledge, applying knowledge of author's craft to understand things like the use of pronouns, punctuation, and dialogue. Also, inferring to interpret ideas by considering the explicit language of the poem and linking those ideas to what is read between the lines. We questioned, and we made adjustments of our thinking by considering alternate viewpoints during discussion of the poem. And now, as we come to the end of part one, I'm going to pass this back to Melinda.
So Barnhouse and Vinton state that this is what we do as readers. We adjust and deepen our thinking about a text as we encounter new details and or other people's thoughts. Though to do so, we must be flexible and willing to entertain a range of ideas before setting our own thinking in stone. We must also be willing to offer up thoughts when they're still a work in progress, when our ideas are tentative and not yet fully formed, which is hard for children who have come to believe that there's always either a right or a wrong answer. At the beginning of this presentation, we said that we were going to take an inductive approach to reader response theory. But to explain that, we've put together a slide that focuses on the difference between deduction and induction. So to give you an example of deductive reasoning starts with a theory. For example, all numbers ending in 0 or 5 are divisible by 5. That's followed by a hypothesis where we might say that the number 15 ends with a 5, so it must be divisible by 5. Our observation is that if we have 15 cookies and there are 5 people, I want to divide the cookies evenly between them, so I can confirm, once I've done that, that each person has received 3 cookies, therefore 15 is divisible by 5. So that illustrates deductive reasoning. Notice when we carry out inductive reasoning how the pattern appears similar, but we're working backwards. And here Sherlock Holmes is a really good example. So while Sherlock Holmes searches for a killer, for example, we search for meaning in a text. We observe the details as we read and we notice patterns perhaps about a certain character, for example. We read between the lines and make valuable inferences that help us construct meaning. In food, music, memory, for example, on their own, as Dawn mentioned, belt, hairbrush, and hand may not have had much meaning for the reader. But in the larger context of a dialogue, however, we can infer meaning based on our prior knowledge and experiences. As we construct meaning from the details, we form a hypothesis as to what the meaning of the text could be, which through discussion and refining our understanding can then become a theory. So as students read, they're like detectives trying to decode the messages in the books or picture books that they read. Barnhouse and Vinton put it this way: by making our thinking more visible, we become aware of the process we follow to make meaning. We can better teach our students how to as well. We've internalized so completely the thinking process involved in making meaning that we're barely aware of them. So as we mentioned before, when we looked at the response process and the ELA programs, talk is an essential part of the process. Talk is the thread that weaves throughout the response process and needs to be carefully cultivated and supported at all stages of the response process. A couple of things to remember about talk. The exchange of ideas leads to new understandings. We're not looking for one right answer, but a negotiation of meaning. Talk needs to be purposeful, and the use of open-ended questions is usually best. Interpretations develop as readers interact with other readers. Talk helps students articulate their thinking. It helps make their thinking visible, and it has to be done within a risk-free environment. If literature is anything, it's an invitation into dialogue, into the great ongoing conversation about the big issues: love, hate, justice, revenge, and hope. To summarize, what did we do as proficient readers? Well, if we think back to what we did and what strategies we used when we read through the poem, we used our prior knowledge. We all know what vodka is and its possible effects. We naturally questioned as we read. We made inferences with words like belt, hairbrush, and hand. On their own, they're just a list of things. but we may have been reading between the lines. As experienced readers, we can determine what's important and make meaning from that. We synthesize to inform new ideas, and we go beyond the literal and we gain insight. We reread as necessary, and we paid attention to the author's craft, noticing things like sensory images that support our understanding and help us to visualize and experience the text. We know the value of talk to construct meaning, so we went and talked about that in breakout rooms with other colleagues. For more information on reader response theory, you can access the reading section of the literacytoday.ca website. Information and resources for response are available here. We've been talking about the website Literacy Today, but we also have a Facebook group with the same name, and I would invite you to join the Literacy Today Facebook group if you haven't already. You can pop Literacy Today in the search tab on Facebook and click Request to Join. If you require more information or have any questions about today's webinar, you can contact us at admin@literacytoday.ca, and thank you so much for spending some time with us.